Hello, David. Delighted to be chatting with you. Myself and Steve Evans here.
Excellent. Hi, David.
Forward.
Good to meet you. And I believe you're in Wiltshire. What part of the world in Wiltshire? You're anywhere near Birdlip Hill by any chance?
Well, Birdlip Hill, which you're asking because it's in the book, is
I'm also asking for another reason, but we'll come on to that.
Sounds good.
I'm a Wiltshire lad, and I live 1 mile from Gloucestershire.
Right
in the very north, and Birdlip Hill is in Gloucestershire, not very far from here.
Okay. I'm asking for two reasons. I used to travel through there on my way back up to the northwest back in the 80s. And we always used to go down that rat run, which we call Birdlip Hill, the rat run, to make the shortcut, of course, as you be aware of it. And I love that road. And there's a pub at the bottom of the road, which you mentioned in the book. And I can't remember it now, whatever it's called. But yeah, I've actually been in that car park.
Small world.
I can't remember what it's called, the name of the
air balloons up on the top on the roundabout.
That's it. That's the one I mean. The air balloon. Yeah. Anyway, so I wanted to mention it for that reason, but obviously it features in the book quite prominently without giving the game away for various reasons. And they're trying to, well, where I'm up to at the minute, they're just escaping away from, or he's trying to evade the people who are looking out for him in the two cars in the car park have been waiting for the guys from the camp, and they're tracing him. I'm just past that bit, really, about a quarter of the way through. So, yeah, it's getting interesting, should we say. It's getting to the nitty-gritty part now, and I'm really, really getting into it. So, anyway, moving on. Yeah, so we established that you live not a million miles away from there. But before we talk about the writing side of things, what do you do to relax in your life? Family, hobbies, or is there something else besides the writing?
Well, the main thing is I retired 18 months ago. So my life changed quite a lot because I had to travel abroad a lot for work. So now I travel, but I travel for pleasure, entirely for pleasure. I've retired to a lovely house, and the house is next to a river. So I spend most of my time staring out of the window into a river when I should be doing all those other things that I'm meant to be doing. So that's really my life. I write every day. I'm a big Times crossword man, so I do the Times crossword and I set crosswords. And I'm a big nature lover, really. That's me.
Sounds ideal. You mentioned your career there, David. Tell us more about it. You were the president of the Landscape Institute, coordinating projects all over the world for nearly 40 years. I reckon you've got your money's worth out of your passport.
I have several passports. I have quite a few with the corners clipped off in my bedside drawer. I started the practice as a landscape architect, landscape planner in 1982. And I started it by going out to Saudi Arabia, which leads on to the first book, which we'll talk about later, because I was working on military cities, obviously a very small cog, on the planning of military cities. And when I came back, I set up the practice planning both in the Middle East and in the UK, everything from new towns to quarries to motorways to whatever it might be. And I was lucky enough in 2000 to be elected the president of all the landscape architects in the UK, which is a government chartered body. So that got me into dealing with government in the UK. And then I was lucky enough to be the chair of the worldwide, or a worldwide grouping of 25,000 of us. So
wow.
I'm lucky. I've been very lucky.
That's some career.
Wow.
You just tell us about your travels. We read that when you were in Saudi Arabia during the Falklands War, it inspires you to start writing a spy novel. Tell us about that.
Well, just to pick one thing, I was, I say, a very small cog on 4 new military cities in Saudi Arabia. These are built in the desert; they're from scratch, and one of them was being built by a French contractor, and everybody on building it, huge project, was French. And this was during the couple of months of the Falklands War. And I was a Brit, the only Brit, as far as I could see, on the whole of this project. And if you, I don't know if you, I'm looking at you and trying to work your age out.
Yeah, 62. 3.
So you'll know that the Falklands War, one of the big
supplied with the exocets from the French. Yeah.
Exactly. And I didn't really realize it while I was there, but Britain was really trying to establish exactly where every exocet in the world was, because they wanted to absolutely know how many exocets the Argentinians could get their hands on. And I was in a French-controlled military city with, as far as I could see, probably had some of these things in it or connected with it.
Wow.
So it I know nothing about the details of that, but it just got my mind racing.
Yeah. Can imagine.
And I think, again, looking at our ages, it's very difficult to talk to anybody these days about pre-computer or pre.
We know.
Even you and I, the three of us, who remember those, even we have to remember back that you couldn't just pick up your mobile. You couldn't just Google something. And we built those military cities before computers, before mobile phones, before fax. Yeah. They were built by telex, which we won't go into because that will take too long. But you know, let's just call it primitive. Yeah. And I've always been interested in spying, and just the intellectual thought of how it operates. And I just realized that in 1982, and especially with the Falklands, this was a pivotal moment in spying, in that up to that point, spying was about, there was not enough information. Yeah. How do you find out the information? About 82, I don't mean exactly 82, but the Falklands was definitely a pivotal point. Yeah. There was too much information. What do you do with too much information? Before computers are quite as good as they are today. And that's why I put that and a couple of other thoughts together, and that really led to the first book.
Okay. Yeah, got me thinking away here.
Yeah, I can relate to the Falklands because I'm an ex-forces personnel myself, and you know, I know all about it and the Exocet missiles. So the whole book relates. I can understand it from that point of view, even though a lot of it's based in Saudi Arabia and the UK so far. I don't know whether you venture further into the Falklands, but it gets a lot of there's a lot of publicity about the Falklands in the book, and it's really interesting for me. So I'm really getting stuck into it and enjoying it, and I can relate to exactly what you're saying with computers and not computers. And that was at the age, wasn't it, where everything was starting to go computerized. But we in the army at the time, we had paper records and computer records, and they couldn't make their minds up which was the best way to go, because it was at that period where it was in the balance, and they just had so much information, and they sometimes acted on the wrong information, which I think is what you try and say somewhat in your book, don't you?
True. The book's not set in the Falklands. The book is set in the UK, Saudi Arabia, and a couple of other countries. The backdrop is just that couple of months. It just provided me with a time frame. It's a very detailed time frame because the whole book takes place in a couple of months. So I had to be very, very strict about the, what happened when.
One of the books you sent me and Steve a copy of the novels, Tip of the Iceberg and the Collation Unit, waving it around here. You can see it on the camera. And well, thank you for that. And it goes without saying that getting a signed copy will in no way influence our soon-to-be objective, glowing, brilliant, splendid 5-star review. Really appreciate that, though, David.
Oh no, it's kind. I couldn't imagine talking to you if you at least physically didn't have the book and you hadn't read, at least a couple of chapters, because it's quite. I have a style like everybody else, and if you've read a couple of chapters, you'll have picked up my style anyway.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm chapter 10 now in the collation unit. And I only read at night, so I've been reading over the last 3 nights. So I've really got into it now. It did take me a little while to get, but this is me, to get into all the different characters and what they do and all that, and your plots coming in. I'm really slow picking that up generally anyway, with whatever I read. But now I'm into it. I'm really gripped by it, and I'm looking forward to the rest of it. Yeah.
Well, I would. I wrote it in 1995, and I would definitely describe it as a slow burner. It's not a whiz bang, two characters follow chronologically, but from the point you're at now, you will find it progresses more naturally. But I needed to set up the complexity for perhaps obvious reasons. My problem, like so many writers who have the day job as well, is I was doing so many other things in 1995, as we've just talked about. And writing was a very secondary thing. It took me 4 years of evenings to do it. And then we come up to the problem, how do you get an agent? Because, the classic problem.
Almost impossible.
Yeah. And it was actually very strange that it was a client of mine who was also a sort of frustrated author who said to me that he had an agent and that he would introduce me to him. And this agent only took on between 2 and 3 new people a year. And it was Graham Greene's agent. Actually, his father was Graham Greene's agent from the beginning. And he I can't remember his age, but I'm going to say he was 70, 75 when I met him. I went to his office in Mayfair, and obviously cutting to the end, he took me on, but with the collation unit.
Brilliant.
And he made it quite clear to me that he was old-fashioned. That was patently obvious from his office in Mayfair. But he said he wasn't a shotgun. It wasn't going to be a shotgun approach. He wasn't going to post this off to 100 publishers. He took a publisher out for dinner or lunch every few days. He would introduce just one publisher, give it to him. It might be 6 weeks before he got a handwritten reply. Then he'd do it again. So it could take years.
Yeah.
So I've got a drawer full of handwritten notes from all the well-known publishers, just saying, "Thanks, Lawrence. Thanks, David. It doesn't quite fit in," that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And I was so lucky to have an agent of that caliber. Unfortunately, he died, and I was doing other things, as we've talked about. And so I put the book away, really. And it's only really when I retired that I thought, I've always had faith. You've got to have faith in your work, or tear it up and chuck it away. And I've got faith as a good story. And I thought, life's too short. I'm certainly not going to spend 10 years at my age, 68, trying to get a new agent. I would publish it myself and just have a bit of fun. Not for the money, I'm not in it for the money. I just wanted people to read it. So I did have an agent, didn't work, and I self-published.
Is this with Troubadour? Is this like a hybrid publisher? You do some of the marketing yourself, but they actually do the format and put the cover on?
As I understand it, it's Matador and Troubadour. Matador are publishers in the normal sense, and Troubadour is their self-publishing arm.
Oh, okay.
And you can, obviously you pay for it, that goes without saying. You can choose the level of support you require. So for the Tip of the Iceberg, the second one, I needed them slightly less because I'd learned slightly along the way.
Of course.
When it comes to the cover, I'd obviously gone to art college for 4 years, so I didn't need much help with the cover. The cover is precisely what I wanted to the pixel. And so different people will want different things. different marketing, different setup, different editing, all the inputs. But I must say I'm very, very impressed with them. Obviously, I've stuck with them twice now, and I'm very, very close to finishing the third book. So I think that will be going through the troubadour process over the next few months.
Talking about a third book, I know we haven't really talked in detail about the other two yet. But talking about the third book, is it these standalone books, or are they going to be part of a series, or there's going to be 2 or 3 or a trilogy, or is this next book you've got completely different again?
Well, the Collation unit was set in 1982, and is standalone. And although there are several main characters, but the main character, Mark Tanner, there are about 80 odd reviews now you can pick up online of the Collation unit. And I would think the one thing that stands out throughout them, they're all very good reviews, is everybody loved that character because he has certain traits, shall we say. And I'm very tempted to write something else with him. But the trouble is, it's 1982, and I've done that. So when, before he died, Gerald, my agent, said to me, one of the reasons the Collation unit wasn't published in the 1990s was because people don't like things set just back a decade. People now like the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, but they don't like the 90s and the noughties yet. We have to go on a couple of decades, and then people get nostalgic. He said to me, and he had read the first couple of chapters of The Tip of the Iceberg, because thank goodness I'd sent it to him before he died. And he said to me, write something in the present day. So I started The Tip of the Iceberg in the present day, or, let's call it the present day. And I created this character, Mike Kingdom, in it. And the book I'm finishing, I'm looking down to my left because it's right next to me. I'm writing the last 2 chapters at the moment. I decided to stick with the same character that I created in the tip of the Iceberg. So in answer to your question, Collation unit is standalone. The Tip of the Iceberg will be the first of a series based in the present day.
David, I've got written down in front of me. Ask David, is the Mike England character going to be going on a new adventure? So let's just put a big tick on that.
You can take that.
Well, that's what I thought about Mark Tanner, actually. I've only just really got into him because, there was a bit in the book about him early on as he was flying out. Yes. And then you didn't hear from him for a while, and he's just coming back into it now. So obviously I've still got to learn a lot about him, but that
if I can ask myself a question, the sort of question you might ask, my favorite chapter I think I've ever written is chapter 7, when Mark Tanner flies out to Saudi Arabia. Without giving too much away, he sat next to a peregrine falcon, which some Saudi prince has decided to. This happened to me, by the way. But when you're sat in economy at the back of a TriStar with everybody smoking, because back in those days everybody smoked.
Yeah,
and I was sat in the back, right at the very back seat. Couldn't see through the smoke, and next to me on a bar, I've got a peregrine falcon with a hood, and so yeah, I enjoy. You'll enjoy the character, I'm sure.
I was trying to imagine that, a peregrine falcon, and I have to read through it twice because I couldn't quite believe what I was reading at first. And I thought, this could be quite funny, this guy with the falcon. Anyway, and we move on, and I'll still yet to see what happens after that. But yeah, that's a great chapter. Yeah, definitely great chapter.
I enjoyed writing that, actually.
David, you know what I'm enjoying most about The Tip of the Iceberg? It's a very serious subject. Different governments around the world. We're talking about impact on the environment, impact on, as yet, isolated Antarctic oceans untouched. But what I'm liking about it is the sort of sly humour in the background as well. There's a particular scene in there with the UK Prime Minister talking to the President of America, the USA, and he sees something move on the President's lap, and he's relieved to see that it's only a dog and not an intern. And that's funny. That's quality. That's a laugh out loud.
Yeah, obviously Terry and I will be swapping books in a few weeks.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's great. I can't stop myself doing it. I have to be careful. I have to be careful because it's, the books are serious in the sense that they're serious thrillers or whodunits, or
it's a counterbalance, isn't it, to that seriousness of it?
I'm not very serious. I'm not going to write. I've no interest of writing lots of gore or awful things, because I don't read those generally.
For shock value.
Yeah, exactly. If we talk about the tip of the iceberg, which is the one you're reading, I don't see why you can't take a very serious subject, get it across to people, and not have a good story with a good character, with a sprinkling of humor throughout. There's one or two characters. They're not comedians, but they just, I think it just relieves, and it's the way I am. And as you know from starting to read it, the whole reason just like we discussed the Collation unit and how I was interested in technology, how the secret services would deal with too much information, and the Falklands War. The tip of the iceberg started with the Antarctic Treaty. Like everybody else, pretty much, I'm sure, who's heard of the Antarctic Treaty of 1961? And it is the most brilliant document. It is the most brilliant document. It's tiny. It's tiny. And just in one sentence, about 50 countries claim segments of Antarctica. And different countries claim different segments. World wars would erupt if everybody fought over it. So what they agreed to do was to suspend all claims for 50 years. So for 50 years, in fact, it's now 70 years, it's been extended, Antarctica has been left alone. The Russians haven't gone there, the Chinese are a little bit. It's all run by a simple, for science only. It's utterly brilliant. And I thought, well, this is great, but what happens when it comes up for review? Because the other thing I didn't realize was the Arctic is just a floating iceberg. When that melts, there's no land there. It's just sea. Antarctica is a continent. Underneath Antarctica is 4.5 million square miles of land. It's 11% of the Earth's land surface. It's 1.5 times bigger than the USA. Imagine the minerals that are under there. What happens if we tear up the Antarctic Treaty and everybody rushes down there? And with climate change, of course, the land is being more and more revealed. And as technology moves on, we don't need humans anymore. It can be done by robotics, the mining or the exploration. So this was my starting point. What would happen? Now, again, just like the Collation units, not set in the Falklands, Tip of the Iceberg not set in Antarctica. It's set in the UK against a conference and a couple of other things that are happening. But it's just the idea that nobody's sure at the very beginning of the book if oil has been discovered or not. And that kicks the whole thing off.
You described that really well. I mean, I'm reading the book anyway, and I'm hooked. And you don't need to hook me, but I think you hook in a few new readers.
Oh, well, that'd be great. That would be great. No, really great.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting, and I can't wait to swap books now. But I'm just right at that point now where I'm really getting into the Mark Tanner, and I can't wait to get some further later on tonight. Anyway, when you're writing, do you have like a strict routine, a writing routine? Do you set your time to one side during the day, or do you just write as and when an idea comes into your head? Or and something I must mention before we go any further than that. I'm guessing, or I assume from what you've explained to us so far, that you've got first-hand knowledge of or a lot of experience in some of this stuff that's explained in the books. It sounds like you didn't have to do a lot of research, well, you probably did, but a lot of it's based on first-hand knowledge is what I'm getting at.
A mixture of both.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Peregrine Falcon with Mark Tanner, and you experienced that yourself. And it's just other one or two things you've mentioned. I thought you've been there and done some of this by the sounds of it. Yeah.
I try and make up some crazier things, not stupidly crazy, but and I find that it's hard to make up things as crazy as what actually happened.
Truth stranger than fiction.
You were asking me about my writing day, and
go on. Yeah,
I get up very early. I'm up at 5:30, so I tend to do the Times crossword, and then I write. So I tend to write in the morning, but not for any real reason. And I set myself a very, very flexible objective, which is to try and write 1,000 words. A chapter's 2,500 words. There are 32 chapters, 80,000 words, just to have something to aim at.
Yeah.
Some days I do 300, and some days I do 1,500. And then of course there are other days when you're traveling or you're doing stuff and you do nothing. But this is not the day job, so I don't beat myself up if I don't achieve it. And I'm writing the last 2 chapters of the book at the moment. And of course, that is an utter joy, because by the time you get there, everybody knows what they're doing. All the characters have taken over.
Yeah.
Because when you write, you create a character. If you take just one that's just leapt into my mind, a minor character. So you give him or her a name, you give them some attributes. They've got to go from A to B, so you start writing from A to B. And there's a lovely point when the character takes over after a few chapters, and the character will you're writing, and the character just goes to the dentist, and you think, I didn't think that. That's not part of the plot.
It's the magic, isn't it?
It's magic. It is absolutely magic when the character is then alive. So so that's my writing day.
Yeah, to be fair, a lot of people say about characters that they come alive in their head, and you put it down and it doesn't look natural. But if that's the character coming alive, get on, just go for it, don't you? Just go with it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
One from me. We've connected on Twitter. Is this your main platform for promotion, or are you using any other social media? Are you using Instagram, TikTok, Facebook?
No, I just use Twitter. Okay. I find Twitter works really well.
Same for me.
I'm on other stuff that directs it to Twitter, but I also find I can put all my effort into it, as opposed to sprinkling it across and taking up more of my time. I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying I'm right. Probably got it wrong. In fact, people should let me know if I have. But
I agree with you. I agree totally. Yeah.
Finally, from me, what advice would you give to somebody starting off on this game for the first time, writing the first book? What would your advice be the best way to go about it?
Well, the first thing is just do it, because you'll always find 100 reasons not to. There's nobody else looking at you. It's just you and a laptop, or you and a pad and paper, a pen and paper. Just write it, because once you've written something, you can improve it, edit it, change it. When it's a blank sheet of paper, you can't do anything with it. I think the other thing is write what you like to read, because you will be more comfortable then. Don't try and write science fiction if you're not interested in science fiction, or you don't know anything about science fiction. Yeah. And then just one silly thing, which is, well, it's not silly, but it's just an odd thing, is choose an original title. That may seem silly, but the Collation Unit, if you Google it, my book comes straight up, because there's nothing else called the Collation Unit. I called the second one The Tip of the Iceberg. Well, there are about 20 books called The Tip of the Iceberg. Yeah. So you can find me if you want to, but it doesn't just leap out. So actually, for the third book, I've got a working title, but whatever it is, it will be an original title that when you Google it, it comes up.
That's brilliant advice. We haven't heard that before, have we, Steve?
That's the first time we've heard that, and it makes a lot of sense, really, doesn't it, if you think about it? Because as soon as I picked up the collation unit, I went, that's an original name. I've not heard of that one before. And well, you've just proved the point to me. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah.
And the other thing, perhaps, because you've just talked about lifting the book up, is make the cover original. Don't do, there are trends in book covers. So there are. Yeah. If you use whatever publisher, they will tend to use what's in at the moment. I didn't want that. So these two, as you can see from what you've got, are completely different to anything else. And just to point out on the tip of the iceberg, just to show you how anal I am, where that dotted line goes down across Antarctica, and where it says has oil been discovered or not, that O is exactly on the South Pole. Okay.
Oh.
I was wondering. I thought
I'm looking at that now.
I thought that would be some reference, but I wasn't quite sure what. So yeah, again, yeah,
it's a little Easter egg for us there. Yeah,
brilliant.
That was brilliant.
Yeah, it's a bit of a criticism of mine. Every time you go to a bookshop on the bookshelves and you see the same type of books or the same genre with the same type book covers, and it just really annoys me. Actually, I want to see something original, so it was refreshing to see yours. Actually, yeah.
Thank you very much. That's great.
David, it's been a delight chatting with you. I've really enjoyed it.
I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been really interesting. Yeah.
Let's keep in touch and maybe chat again with the third novel, when Mike England, when she is in the next book. Mike England.
Mike England.
Not that I'm giving anything away.
Oh, there with the sex change, of course, is in the new book.
Yeah, good stuff. Nice one. But for now, David, cheers, mate.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Okay, bye.